Lesson 2, vocabulary. And then draw a squiggly line underneath number, what was the last number, Cullen?
8.
8. So draw a line under number 8 on your chapter 1, lesson 2, vocabulary. And then write today's date. And then you're going to start with number 9, which we don't know just yet. So then put your pencil down. Put your notebook under your book and open to page 24. We're on page 24. Yes, sorry.
And it
Was our last one
I was just wondering towards the
basin?
It was canyon.
Just look.
It was canyon. Okay, so you should be open to page 24. Your vocabulary notebook should be underneath your book. I'm waiting for everybody to be open to page 24 in their social studies book and their vocabulary notebook under their book so that they're not tempted to draw. I'm waiting for everybody to be on page 24 in their social studies book.
Page 4.
24. Page 24 in your in your social studies textbook. Okay, like I said, we're doing another skills lesson. So last time we learned how to use latitude and longitude. This time we're going to learn how to use an elevation map, like the one on page 25. So go ahead and read to us, Zari.
Use an elevation map. Why it matters.
Okay. All right.
Elevation
you want to set something
is
up for,
the height of the land above sea level.
Pause. What's our next word, Zari?
Elevation.
Elevation. And what is elevation, Zari?
The height of the land above sea level.
Good. It's the height. Make sure you spell height right. It's a weird word. The height of the land above sea level. So basically, if sea level is 0 feet, how high is the land above sea level? Because the whole country can't be at sea level, right? Otherwise, there'd be no mountains or hills or anything, or basins or canyons, nothing. It would just be flat. And that's just not possible, especially for a place as big as the United States. So elevation is, okay, how far above sea level is the land? How tall is that mountain? How tall is that hill? How deep is that basin? How deep is that canyon? Or, even here, where we think of it as being flat, we're still a little bit above sea level. So that's what elevation is. Zari, keep reading.
An elevation map can tell you how high or how low different areas of the country are.
Good. So we're going to use this elevation map, which you guys have obviously a much easier to read one in your book. This is just so that if you're not sure where I'm talking about, you can see where I'm pointing out. But we're going to use this map that's in your book, and then one you're going to get later, to figure out how high or low places are. How far above sea level is this mountain? How far below sea level is this basin? Whatever. Okay, thank you, Zari. Go ahead and read next. Kingston, loud and slow. Oh, face shields on. They should still be on. Because they should be on for anything where we read out loud, where we have a textbook like this. Pull your mask down.
The map on page 25 is colored to show a range of elevations. Each color stands for an area's highest and lowest elevations, as well as all the elevations in the map.
Good. So this map that we're going to look at uses colors to show the elevations. The map you're going to do for independent practice or homework, if we run out of time, uses patterns. So this one uses colors. Patterns, remember, are like little designs that are all the same. But this one uses colors. Keep going, Kingston.
The map also uses shading to show relief or differences.
What's our next word, Kingston? Number 10.
Relief.
Relief. R-E-L-I-E-F. Relief. Not E-I-F, but I-E-F. And what is relief, Kingston? Differences in elevation. And so this map uses shading to show this relief. So look at your map at where the Appalachian Mountains are. Look at where the Appalachian Mountains are on your map. Do you see how it looks like things are shaded? Like right under the IAN, you see like this dark little line that looks like it's shaded. That's to show that there's like a sudden increase in elevation. So what is there? What is in the Appalachian Mountains where you would have a sudden increase in elevation? Where the land would get really high all of a sudden? What do you have in the Appalachian Mountains where the land would get high really quickly? It's not on the map. You have to think about it. What are there a lot of in the Appalachian Mountains where the land gets high really quickly? Zari.
A lot of like big mountains.
Mountains, exactly. Exactly, mountains. So relief shows that, hey, all of a sudden the land's going to get really high. So when you see that little bit of shading, what does that tell you is there? If you see that little bit of shading, like we see a lot of it in the Appalachian Mountains, we see a lot of it over here in the west near something else. Victoria. Mountains. Wherever you see that little shading called relief, there's probably a lot of mountains there because relief shows, hey, the land is changing really quickly. Mountains are where the land just all of a sudden gets a lot higher. Okay, very good. Keep going, Kingston. So if you see the dark shading, well, that means, hey, there's a mountain or a canyon. Keep going.
Light shading shows gentle rising.
So if you see light shading, oh, that means, hey, there's a hill or maybe a basin. Because those are more gradual. They are just a little bit of rising and dropping. Mountains and canyons are just all of a sudden it drops down like the Grand Canyon, or all of a sudden it goes way, way up like Mount McKinley or Denali as we call it now. Okay, thank you, Kingston. So, now before we get to the practice, let's look at this map on page 25. We see a lot of different colors. Well, we have to know what the colors mean, right? So where do you look? What is it called that tells you what symbols and colors mean on a map? What is that called? The place that tells you, like the little diagram that tells you what colors and what symbols or patterns mean on a map. What is that called, Cullen?
A map key.
A map key. Sometimes it's also called a map legend, but it means the same thing. A map key or a map legend. I will usually say the word key, But if I say the word legend when I'm talking about a map, or you see the word legend, you know that it means the same thing. So here, this map key tells us what these colors mean. It also tells us what symbols mean. The yellow upward triangle means, hey, this is the highest point in the whole country. So who can find the yellow triangle? What state is the yellow triangle in? Find the yellow triangle. What state is that yellow triangle in? Victoria. Alaska, right here. What does that yellow triangle represent?
The highest point.
Which is what?
The highest mountain.
Which is what? Look at the yellow triangle. What is that line? What does that yellow triangle indicate? It's labeled. MT stands for Mount. We've said this a bunch. I said it even like 3 seconds ago. We call it Denali now. Michaela, what is it?
The highest point.
We already said that. What does it represent? So once you find the highest point, it's going to label it. If you go to Alaska and you find that yellow triangle that indicates the highest point in the country, it is labeled. Michaela? Mount McKinley. How tall is Mount McKinley, Michaela? 20,320 feet. It's really, really tall. Okay, what does the red triangle that's pointing down represent? What does it represent first? Not the specific name, but what does it represent? Smith.
The lowest point.
The lowest point of the country. Smith, have you found the lowest point yet? Where is the lowest point? What state is it in? Ooh, it's not labeled. Let's see if you know this, Smith. Kingston, can you help her out? What state is the lowest point in? Not Nevada. It's really close to Nevada, but it's just over the border from Nevada in Carla?
California.
California. Okay, Smith, and what is the name of the lowest point in the United States?
Death Valley.
Death Valley. Ooh, and wait, there's a little minus sign in front of the number. What do you think that means? There's a minus sign in front of the number for the elevation of Death Valley. What do you think that means, Zari?
I think that means it's 282 feet below
Below what? What is 0
sea
feet?
level.
Sea level, very good. So Death Valley is the lowest point in the country. It's 282 feet below sea level. That's what that that minus sign, we would say negative 282 feet. That means it's below 0. 0 feet is sea level. Okay. So now let's look at the rest of the key. So we know the highest point is Mount McKinley. It's 20,320 feet above sea level. We know the lowest point is Death Valley. It's 282 feet below sea level. And then, of course, the national capital, which is Washington, D.C. But now let's look at this part. This is the part that some people find a little confusing. But once you know, it's not too confusing. So I'm going to erase the vocabulary words because we don't need this anymore. And I need to be able to write. So look at that triangle. It looks kind of like a mountain, right? So that means the higher you go, that color means it's higher. It's like a mountain. So at the very bottom, we have pink. We have pink at the very bottom. Anything that is pink is below sea level. So if we look at Death Valley and a little bit right down here, at the border of the southern border of California and Mexico, we see that there's some pink. That means all the land on this map that is pink is below sea level. It's lower than sea level. So if it rains a lot there, it's probably going to flood. Well, remember, the southwestern United States is desert. So what do they not really have a lot of in these places that are below sea level? Zari?
A lot of animals.
Not animals. There's lots of animals in the desert. We read a whole story. But we know desert areas don't get a whole lot of what, Zadie?
Rain.
Rain.
Oh.
So it doesn't flood too often. Good. Okay, so then anything that is pink is below sea level. That means it's below 0 feet elevation. Next, we have the green. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing, so make sure you're looking up here and you're looking at your book. We see at the bottom of the green, let's just look at feet for right now. We're not going to worry about meters. Meters are just another way, another measurement, but we're just going to look at feet because we mostly use feet in the United States. So at the bottom of the green is 0. At the top of the green, you see 655. Do you see that? At the bottom of the green is 0. At the top of the green is 655. Give me a thumbs up when you see it. If not, I will come and show it to you. Do you see how the bottom of the green is 0 and the top of the green is 655? Do you see that? Kingston and Ethan, do you see that? That means everything that is green is between 0 and 655 feet above sea level. So that means anything that is green could be right at 0. It could be at 100. It could be at 200. It could be at 300. It could be at 427. It could be at 654. So anything that is green is it's between 0 and 655 feet above sea level. So if I tell you that a place is green, that means it could be 0 feet, it could be 150, it could be 300, 400, 500, 654, it could be any of those. So look at the southeastern United States. Oops. Look at the southeastern United States. And right along the eastern coast of the United States, it's all green. We know that we call this area the plains. Plains are usually flat and grassy. So now we can see, well, the elevation really does show that it's flat and grassy. We know that along the coast, the eastern coast, we have the coastal plain. Again, plains are flat and grassy. So that means anything that is green is very flat. Now there may be little hills, but it's pretty flat. Good. We are green, which means that we are in a very flat part of the country. Okay, after green, we have yellow. So then we come up and we have yellow. At the bottom of the yellow is 655. What's at the top of the yellow? Who can tell me what is at the top of the yellow? The bottom of the yellow is 655 feet above sea level. The top of the yellow is what? Zadie.
1,640.
1,640 feet. So that means anything that is yellow is between 655 feet and 1,640 feet. So that means anything where we see yellow, like in the Great Plains and the northern interior, the northeastern interior plains. It's a little bit taller, but it's still, we're not quite in the mountains. We're more in the hills now. If it's green, we're on the plains. If it's yellow, we're getting more into hills. If it's, so we're getting more into hills because we're between 650 feet and 1,640 feet above sea level. Then we get into the orange. At the bottom of the orange is where we left off, 1,640 feet. So that means at its lowest, land that is orange is 1,640 feet above sea level. What about at its tallest? Look at the orange. At its tallest, the orange land is what, Carla?
It is 6,516.
Good. Not 16, Carla, but 60. 6,560 feet is at the top of the orange. That means any land that is orange at its lowest is 1,640 feet, and at its highest is 6,560 feet. So that means any land that is orange is between 1,640 feet and 6,560 feet. So make sure you're paying attention to this because you will have questions where you have to say, okay, this place has this pattern, that means it has to be, okay, I know I'm trying to find the elevation of Phoenix, Arizona. Well, if I look at Phoenix, it's orange. So that means it has to be a number between 1,640 and 6,560 feet. After the orange, we get into the red. So orange, we're starting to get into the mountains. We're still got some hills, but definitely not flatland, definitely not plains. We're getting into the orange. We're getting into the taller hills and the mountains. Well, then we get to the red. And the red, at its lowest, is 6,560 feet. At its tallest, land that is red is what? Cullen?
13,120.
13,120 feet. Now, I know that says above, but if it's red, is it above 13,120 feet or at its tallest? Is it 13,120 feet? Victoria? Is it? Because is 6,560 above 13,120? No. So that means land that is red, you are really in the mountains now, is between 6,560 feet and 13,120 feet. So you are really in the mountains. We don't see any of the red in the Appalachian Mountains because remember, they're young and they've flattened out over the years. But if we go to the Rocky Mountains, we can see those really tall mountains. It's mostly red. That's because they're all really tall mountains. Well, then we have a little more. We have the purple. There is no measurement at the top of the purple. That's because all of the purple is above 13,120 feet. We only see the purple, let's see, you see a little bit of purple right around where it says Mount McKinley. If you look really closely, you can see a little bit of purple right around where it says Mount McKinley in Alaska. The purple kind of blends in a little with the red right around the Rocky Mountains, right around Denver. It blends in, but if you look really, really closely, you can see a little bit of that purple. Victoria, yes?
Beside the Pacific Ocean and beside the Death Valley, and if you look down, there's purple.
That's not purple. That's pink. Which means the complete opposite. Because the purple is really, 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 really tall. It's like only the peaks of the highest mountains in the country. The pink is the complete opposite. It's below sea level. It's like the lowest points of the country. So now that we know how to read this map key, let's answer the practice questions on page 24. Are you ready? Make sure that you're paying close attention to that key. Look at what it's between. Okay, so number one.
Which number
What
was it?
is the
Explain.
elevation of Santa Fe, New Mexico? So you're not going to be able to tell the exact elevation, but you can tell a range. That means it's between this and this. Hold on. Zari, please make sure that you're listening to my questions. And then, okay, so what do you need, Zari?
I need to go to the bathroom.
Okay, you should have done that during, while you were going to while you were doing lunch and all that. Go ahead, but we're not going to wait for you. You're going to have to watch this lesson later because you missed quite a lot of it, okay? And you should have used the restroom during, when you were had your lunch and break. Okay, so let's look. We're just going to answer that first question. What is the elevation of Santa Fe, New Mexico? You're not going to be able to tell me an exact elevation, but you can give me a range. A range means it's between this and this. So, find Santa Fe, New Mexico. Once you have found Santa Fe, New Mexico, put your thumb up. Yes, Smith. Oh. Find Santa Fe, New Mexico. Once you have found Santa Fe, New Mexico, once you know all your states, that's going to make this much easier. Put your thumb up and keep it up. Once you have found Santa Fe, New Mexico, put your thumb up and keep it up. Smith, what color is Santa Fe, New Mexico?
Santa Fe.
Red.
Red. So that means what's the elevation? We don't know the exact, but we know the range. Range means it's between this and this. So Smith, what is the elevation of Santa Fe, New Mexico?
It's between 6,560 and 13,120.
Make sure you use the unit. What are we talking? Are we talking about miles, inches?
Oh, feet.
Feet. Very good. So, Santa Fe, New Mexico is somewhere between, it's red, so that means it's somewhere between 6,560 feet and 13,120. We don't know exactly because their map doesn't tell us. But we know it has to be between those two elevations. Does everybody understand how Smith found that? Good. Now, Smith, is that land in Santa Fe, New Mexico higher or lower than the land near Boston, Massachusetts? So first step, you have to find what? Smith?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Good. And then you have to look at what?
The height.
The height, by looking at the color. Good. So Smith, did you find Boston? Have you found Boston, Massachusetts? What color is Boston, Massachusetts? We're looking at the map on page
Green.
25. What color is it, Smith?
Green.
Green. So Smith just told us that Santa Fe, New Mexico is red. That means it's between 6,560 feet and 13,120 feet. Then she found Boston, Massachusetts, and she told us that that land is green, which means what's its elevation, Smith?
It's between 0 and 655 feet.
Good. So which one is Santa Fe higher or lower than Boston, Massachusetts?
Higher.
Higher. We can tell that because we can see that red is higher on our key than green. So we didn't even necessarily need to know the elevations. All we needed to know was that the color of Santa Fe was red, the color of Boston was green. That means Santa Fe has a higher elevation than Boston. Very good. So does everybody understand how to compare the elevations of places? Look at the color. Is the color of one place higher or lower than the other? If the color is higher, that means is the land higher or lower? If the color is higher on our key, is the land higher or lower? Michaela? Higher. Good. Because our key kind of looks like a mountain. So we know the higher up the color, the higher up the land. Okay, number 2. What is the elevation of Kansas City, Missouri? So find Kansas City, Missouri. Once you found Kansas City, Missouri, put your thumb up. Once you found Kansas City, Missouri, once you guys know your states and where they are, this will be like, oh, I got that. Michaela, what's the elevation of Kansas City, Missouri? What color is it first?
Yellow.
Yellow. So that means its range is between
655 and 1,640
feet. Good. Kansas City is yellow. Here it is. It's in the plains. It's not entirely flat, but it's mostly flat. So the elevation of Kansas City is yellow, so it's between 655 and 1,640. Now, number 3. This one's a little bit more of a critical thinking question. You can solve it, but you have to think a little bit more. You can't just point to it on the map. You have to use what you know, look at the map, and come up with your answer. Number 3. How does elevation change along the Mississippi River from its source to its mouth? The Mississippi River runs right through here. Remember, the source is where it starts. The mouth is where it ends. How does that elevation change from the source, or where it starts, to the mouth, where it ends? How does the elevation change? Once you have an answer, raise your hand. How does the elevation change from the source, or the beginning of the Mississippi River, to the mouth, or the end? How does that elevation change? Victoria.
It changes because it goes to green, and then a little bit orange, or yellow, and then it turns all yellow.
So what does that mean? Zadie, what does that mean? If it's going from yellow to green, what does that mean?
It's getting lower.
It's getting lower. And what do we know about water and gravity? Where does water go? Does it go uphill, or does it go downhill? Michaela? Down. So does that make sense why the river would flow downstream? Very good. Okay, everybody feel good about elevation maps? Perfect, because you have independent practice, and we have 30 minutes, so you'll actually have time to finish it. That's like the first time this year. Okay, so go ahead and look at the front of your paper. There's only one side. At the top, you have a map. It is labeled Elevations of North Carolina. That means instead of looking at the whole country, we're just looking at North Carolina. You can see your map key. It looks exactly like the one in our book. It just has patterns instead of colors. And do the elevations go as high as the one in our book? No. So what does that mean about North Carolina? Zadie?
It's not as tall as in our book.
It's not as tall as like all the other countries. Because, remember, North Carolina is mostly in what part of the country? What is that area called? Along the coast, on the east, along the east coast. What is that area called? Smith?
The coastal plain.
The coastal plain, and we know that plains are very flat. Most of North Carolina is in the coastal plain. Now there are the Appalachian Mountains do run through part of it. So that means most of North Carolina is pretty flat. But then we do have the Appalachian Mountains, which get a little taller. So there is a range of elevations. So use that key and this map to answer these questions. You'll have to find these cities. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the map to match each location, each city or town, with the letter of the correct elevation range. So you're going to look at this city. You're going to find Charlotte, North Carolina. Find the dot next to Charlotte. Make sure you're looking at the dot, not like the end of the word or whatever. Make sure you're looking at the dot. Carla, you shouldn't be starting yet. You should be listening. So look at the dot next to North Carolina. You can see the pattern. Is it just shaded, which means below sea level? Does it have those tiny little dots, which means it's between 0 and 500 feet? Does it have the little dashes that show that it's between 500 and 1,500 feet? Does it have a lighter shading, which means it's between 1,500 and 3,000 feet? Does it have darker shading, which means it's between 3,000 and 5,000 feet? Or does it have that diamond pattern, which means it's taller than 5,000 feet? So you're going to do that with each of those and then match it to the letter. So A is 0 to 500 feet. B is 500 to 1,500 feet. C is 1,500 to 3,000 feet. And D is 3,000 to 5,000 feet. Oh, and E is above 5,000 feet. So find each of these cities, look at the dot next to it, and look at the pattern of the land behind it. Go ahead and begin. You have 23 minutes. Once you're done at school, please check to make sure you didn't make a silly mistake. Sometimes when we have like 5-question things like this, we're like, oh, we can do it like that. And then you end up making silly mistakes, which then bring your grade down, way down. Because if there's only 5 and you get one wrong, that means not so good.